Let's go back. Way back. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Not that far back. Come forward. Yeah, right about there. The year was 1969. It was the era of peace, bell-bottom pants, and platform shoes. There was a big phone company called AT&T, and they had a division called Bell Labs. At Bell Labs, there were a couple of smart guys. One named Ken, the other Dennis. There were other smart folks than that, too. But Ken was thinking about how he could run this program that he wrote, a game called Space Travel, on this Digital Equipment Corporation model PDP-7 that had a whopping 4 kilobytes of memory. 4 kilobytes of memory? What's a kilobyte?
It's easy, George. 10 to the negative 9 times 10 to 12 equals 10 to 3. Nano, tera, kilo.
Okay, so whatever, 4 nanoterabytes. But Ken was thinking about how he could write an operating system completely to his tastes, one that was small, could run on small hardware, was portable, and came with source code so that he could share it with other members of the development community. They were tired of working on these big systems all the time. Dennis thought this was cool, and so they set to work. Things progressed pretty well for 4 years, and by 1973, they'd invented a language called C. And Dennis had written a C compiler for it. They built their operating system in that language and ran it. And they published a paper introducing their achievements and calling their operating system Unix. Pretty quickly, the word of Unix spread all throughout Bell Labs, and everyone started to use it. You see, writing the operating system in a higher level language such as C was fundamental to widespread adoption. It allowed for hardware portability. So long as you could compile it down to the assembly language of whatever hardware you had, then you could run it. Nobody had really done it that way before. Conventionally, operating systems had always been written in the assembly language of the specific hardware. So, with its small footprint and the availability of source code, Unix was a groundbreaking evolution.
Is that a roll of paper towel? No, that's a plotter printer. Okay, there. Is that better? Oh, okay, yeah, better. That's a plotter printer.
Once the paper was published, not only had Unix gained popularity within Bell Labs, but without, universities and research centers were clamoring to get their hands on a copy of Unix as well. Many of them, over the course of the next few years, made contributions that were then shared back with Bell Labs, who incorporated them back into the original source code. And by the late 1970s, Unix was spreading pretty much unrestricted outside AT&T. This was due, in part, to earlier in the 1950s when the U.S. Department of Justice initiated an antitrust lawsuit against the company. Consequently, AT&T were prohibited from commercializing their non-telephony technology. More than that, they were required to license it to anyone who asked. Meanwhile, back at Bell Labs, Ken, Dennis, and the gang weren't unhappy to have their source code circulating. That was their vision from the beginning, to have it shared and thereby improved through collaboration of the community. As early as 1974, the Computer Science Department at the University of California, Berkeley, started working on the Unix source code. Those cowbears got their paws around Unix and mauled it like a pot of cardinal honey. And in 1977, they released the Berkeley Software Distribution, also known as BSD Unix, which still survives until today in popular distributions such as NetBSD, OpenBSD, FreeBSD, and Mac OS X. In 1978, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency contracted with the engineers at Cal Berkeley to implement their TCP/IP protocol in BSD. You see, DARPA had designed TCP/IP in order to connect their computers to the ARPANET.
What's the ARPANET? The ARPANET was kind of like the grandfather to the internet.
Anyway, they were using VAX hardware from Digital Equipment Corporation and deciding whether they should contract with DEC to implement TCP/IP in DEC's VMS operating system or choose Unix for its more open licensing. In the end, they chose to fund TCP/IP development with the engineers at Cal Berkeley in BSD rather than be encumbered by licensing a proprietary operating system from a commercial vendor. By 1983, the lawsuit by the U.S. Department of Justice upon AT&T concluded, and AT&T was broken into the smaller Baby Bells. Consequently, the company was no longer restricted from commercializing Unix, so it immediately began enforcement of its licensing and introduced to the market System 5, its first supported Unix release. The same year, the Berkeley Software Foundation released BSD version 4.2, which introduced TCP/IP implementation, while System 5 had none. This marked the beginning of the battle of Unix vendors competing for market share.